Usually the thing that you are most afraid to leave behind or a decision that's extremely scary is the number one thing that you're going to be most grateful that you did.
Hello again to our multifaceted girlies. I'm Ashlyn.
And I'm Blake, and we are welcoming you back to another episode with us under our new name, Softly Unfiltered. Let's cheers to that.
Cheers. We just sincerely want to thank everyone for just being down with us from the beginning when we started this podcast about 2 years ago. We're just so grateful for the community that we've built, but we've been able to have these hard conversations and conversations that weren't really on platforms such as these. And so with that being said, I think me and Blake are just really excited for the new beginning with this new name.
Yes. And, we had some circumstances change where we can no longer be the Suburban Black Girl Podcast, but we're embracing that as redirection, a blessing in disguise. We're very grateful that we were able to build this community under Suburban Black Girl where so many people could relate to that experience and the trials and tribulations that maybe aren't talked about as much of being, the only Black girl in the room a lot of times, or growing up being the only Black girl in predominantly white suburbia. And so we are so glad that so many of you are here because of that. But also we've built this platform as, the multifaceted girlies, and this whole idea that we as Black women, we are not a stereotype. We cannot be kept in a box. And we feel like our new name, Softly Unfiltered, also better represents this community and the idea of being multifaceted, right? Because it also describes me and Ashlyn very well. Those of you that watch us every week know we are not the loudest podcast out. We are not just overly crazy talking about ratchetness every week, but we are multifaceted. So we have our moments, but overall, we have hard conversations. We talk about uncomfortable topics, but, we do it in our voices, which is, a little bit more soft. And so this whole idea is about you can be many things at once. That's always what we have represented. And so, yes, we had to change our name, unfortunately, but we actually are seeing it again, like I said, as a blessing in disguise, because multifaceted fits that exact juxtaposition of what Softly Unfiltered also represents. So, we hope you guys will embrace this new name as much as we are.
Yeah, nicely said. And I feel like the conversations aren't going to change, just the name, right? And we're also excited for what's to come with this new name. And so we're just interested to just ride this journey with y'all. And I think with this new name, we'll be able to maybe open Pandora's box to a lot more different things, and you'll kind of get to know me and Blake before the cameras roll, right? So I'm excited.
Yes. Amen.
Yes. So with that being said, today's topic is about what if changing directions was the best thing that ever happened to you? So we're going to be talking about pivoting, of course, not as a last resort or a sign that something went wrong, but as one of the most intentional, courageous things you can do. We're getting into why so many of us resist changing direction, even when every sign is pointing in a new direction.
Yeah, and obviously this topic, and it's kind of ironic because we had this topic in mind for a while, but we felt like it was very fitting for the pivot that we are making today and have been working on behind the scenes for the past couple of months. Very on brand for what we've been going through. Sometimes a pivot can really feel like losing a part of your identity, or it can just be upsetting because you attached yourself to what your original plan or your original path was, right? We were very attached to the name Suburban Black Girl, because it defined how we grew up. And I won't speak for you, but I feel like we became more attached to the name once we saw how many people were relating to the experience. Right. And that's what really made it upsetting for us at first that we had to change it. So it can be that initial sting of I have no choice. I have to change direction, but then you embrace it, and redirection is protection. So
that is true. Well, yeah, let's get into it. So my first question to you is, why are we so scared to change directions even when we know the current path isn't working?
I think a lot of times because everything that we are taught about commitment means staying the course. And also staying the course and then having to change directions, it can kind of feel like a failure in the moment, but also if you're someone like me who's such a planner, and then you're having to go down a path that you did not plan to be on, like it also is scary. Like we can recognize that. Yes, pivoting can like be the best decision you ever made in your life, but also when you are having blind faith and going down a path that like you really don't see like the full story right ahead of you, that can be scary, and it can be scary to embrace.
For sure. I think the biggest thing with the change of direction is just it feels really uncomfortable, right? It's unfamiliar. And so, as humans, we're naturally just attracted to things that are familiar to us. So, change is very scary. And I also think, sometimes, when you do have to change directions, in the back of your mind, you're also thinking of the people that are going to question you or be like,
have something to say.
Come on. Because even when we changed our name, everyone's like, why? What do you mean? Like,
yeah.
And they're asking all these questions. And it's like, yes, we thought about everything you're about to ask me right now. We've already done that. Thank you so much. Just know that there's a pivot and it's fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think it's the namesayers that come in and try to make you just feel away and things of that nature. But I've always been a big advocate of a good pivot. I love a good pivot. Like I love kind of going a new direction and not really sure what is on the other side, but just being open to the fact like it's probably going to be something more beautiful and bigger than I could ever imagine. Because I feel like a lot of pivots in life, when you do have a pivot, you look back and you're like, that's the best thing that ever happened to me.
And I think to your point, a lot of what keeps people stuck is what is everyone going to think?
Yes.
The opinions of people that barely know them, the opinions of people, that are closest to them. But if it feels right to you, or, you feel like you're doing what you got to do, because it's your life, right? Everybody can have their opinions, but at the end of the day, you're the one that has to live it.
Right.
It's very easy to make opinions about what someone else is doing because you're not the one in their shoes. What do you think the difference is between quitting and pivoting, and how do you know which one you're doing? I really like that question because a lot of times, people want to give up.
Yeah, it's easy to.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And I feel like it's easier to give up than it is to keep going and go through a redirection, right? I think the main difference between quitting and a pivot is that you simply gave up. When we were basically not able to use this name anymore, we could have given up and been like, well, guess podcasting isn't for us. You know what I mean? But we have dreams of doing this podcast. It's not like we were ever attached to a name.
Yeah.
It's just like we love what we're doing, and we're going to continue to have these conversations under any name, even if it was called ABC Podcast, okay?
Yeah.
So, I think that's the main thing. And then, of course, a pivot is just a redirection. I think it's just kind of like when you go back to the drawing board, you kind of realign, refocus. But I think there are two very different things, and you can just decipher which one you're doing. Are you stopping, or are you continuing to grow? So I think that's the main thing. I think when you stop, that's when you know that you're not really pivoting, you're just kind of giving up. But you can never give up.
Yeah. And I think one word you just said about realign, because I had written down misalignment, right, is the difference. Quitting is like giving up because something is difficult, i.e. we were like, oh Lord, y'all have no idea.
Yeah.
We were like, good God, what are we going to do? But I think pivoting is quote unquote leaving because something is wrong for you.
Yeah.
Like it no longer fits you or the vision you see for yourself in your life, right? So you're still on the journey. You're just, the GPS is rerouting you, is how I would say, right? We are still on this podcast journey, but we are taking I-10 instead of I-45.
And I don't mind. I-10 has more lanes.
Exactly. So... Oh my gosh. But yeah, I think one thing that you can like ask yourself, right, is like, if this became easy tomorrow, like, would I still want it? Because, right, sometimes you can just be going through a hard season and that's going to make you want to give up or pivot or whatever it is, right? And sometimes you just have to weather the storm.
Yeah.
But then when it's like, no, if like this became the easiest thing ever and I still don't want it, then I feel like that's misalignment.
For sure. I feel like I'm in that season like right now in my life where I'm like, what else can go wrong? You know what I mean? But I know once I'm out of this little hole, things are going to be looking up.
Agreed.
How would you say like you grieve the plan that you had before you can really embrace the new direction?
Something I feel like I learned in therapy over the years, especially when I first started, like she would always push me to like feel my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know how I got to this place, but I just got to a place where I was just like suppressing everything or maybe like compartmentalizing, right? So I always just say like feel your feelings and acknowledge your feelings. Like it can feel like you're failing. That can be upsetting. That can even be sad that the way you envision something to go did not work out. Like if you applied for a job and you really, really wanted it and you get that rejection letter, like it's literally okay to be sad, and you also need to allow yourself to feel that.
Absolutely.
Right? So to me, that's step one. Like, of course, if you tell someone, oh, I didn't get it, they're going to be like, oh, it's okay, you'll get the next one, right? But it's like, it's okay for you to take that moment to be disappointed,
right,
and acknowledge your feelings in that way. So I would say that's number one. But then, as I said earlier, like secondly, I would just embrace the redirection as protection, right? Lately, even for me, I use the job example because just interviewing on and off, whatever, for the past couple months, it's like, anytime I don't get something, maybe I feel that initial disappointment, like I said, but I really don't stay disappointed long because I'm like, oh, well, that one wasn't for me.
Yeah.
You know, there's a reason, and I'm not going to sit here and spend too long being upset about it because that one was not for me. For whatever reason, it was not for me. And especially when it comes to applying for jobs, I've learned that because in the past, there were jobs that I thought I wanted, and the next one that came along was the one that was much better for me, or higher paying, or a better title, or whatever. I think the perfect example for me is actually my current job. I was interviewing for my current company and another company at the same exact time. They were both senior manager roles. And my current company, which I'm feeling now, hiring process is like slow AF, like as molasses. And I like hadn't heard from them for a while because I had given my salary requirements and it was above what they wanted. So again, in this idea of, well, if it's not for me, it's not for me. I didn't stress about it. And also it was easy for me not to stress because I was interviewing with another company.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I have something else anyway that I'm like on the 4th round of. So I finished all the interviews and the person that would be my boss just wanted like one more follow-up. And she wanted to ask me like, I know something that's important to you is your career path, like the trajectory, whatever, and having that clearly defined growth for you to join a new company. And so I was like, yeah, I'd like to be a director, And she's like, well, I'm going to be honest, like, obviously we have a director. I don't know how many years that would take for that to happen, so on and so forth. Either way, it was more money than I was making in my current job. So I was like, would still somewhat be a win.
Right.
They did end up rejecting me. Why? I don't know. Maybe it was because they knew that I wanted that or whatever, but I got that rejection. Meanwhile, my current company, maybe a week later, came back, met the salary requirements that I wanted, and changed the role from senior manager to associate director.
Yeah.
So that is an example of just, number one, patience, but seeing it through, like not lowering your standards. But also, I want to slap myself in the face. If I wanted to be a director or whatever, stick with that.
Right.
And instead I was going to settle for the other role just because it was like a little bit more money. And then imagine if they would have offered me and I accepted it.
Come on. No, seriously. Like you just never know like what blessings are just being blocked by you just kind of just being a little bit more patient. So I kind of find myself in that same position right now looking for new jobs.
Yeah. So of course, at first when I was not hearing back from my current company and then I got that rejection, I was like, oh damn, I'm back to square one. But yeah,
it all worked out. But I feel like there's nothing better than that. It's like, it's still worth the shot, right? It's still worth to see what else is out there. And it's just good. It's good to know. It's like, because I feel like once you're kind of in a role for a while, you like, dang, I could be making this much. Right. You know what I mean? Right. Or it's like, even me, like if I get certain interviews, I'm like, oh wow, I qualify for this type of title? Okay, bet. You know what I mean? It's good to know that. So it's always good to know your worth. But I feel like back to the question that I asked you about just kind of, you know, the grief when you're kind of going through something and you're having to embrace the new direction. I think, you know, for me, I'm currently going through grief in another aspect. And, you know, one thing I've been telling myself, it's okay to not be okay, right? Like if someone asks me lately, how are you? Not okay. I'm all right. I'm not going to sit here and naturally respond like I usually do with I'm good. Because I'm not good. I'm not. You know, right now my emotions are kind of all over the place. You know, sometimes I wake up in the morning, I feel really heavy, or I'm just don't really want to talk, or I'm kind of angry. You know, I'm in grief. I'm realizing, I think this is the first time I've really gone through grief like this. And I'm realizing it's so many different emotions. But it kind of takes me back to like how I felt when we had to kind of make the shift with our own podcast name. And you feel all the feelings, right? And I think it's okay. And it's normal to go through all the different feelings when you're kind of going through grief and you're going through a transition, right? So I say give yourself grace, but also let the people around you close to you know what's going on. That way, like, no offense, if you may like crash out a bit or you may be a little more emotional, you should kind of have a pass, right? Because it's like, I'm going through some shit right now, right? So it's kind of like, please tread lightly. And so I think with that, give yourself the time to kind of grieve. But then you also realize when that new thing is on the horizon, it'll be fine. But I think it's like you have to give yourself the time to grieve before you just hop onto the next thing. Because how many of us don't grieve and you realize like you're spiraling eventually? So give yourself that time to kind of just grieve.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Feel your feelings. It's okay. Especially Black women. What you just said about, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Like, no.
Yeah.
It's okay to be like, actually, I'm struggling today. What role do you think fear plays in keeping us locked into paths that no longer serve us?
Because I feel like change is really hard. Like I was saying before, I think it's unfamiliar. Like no one wants to go down an unfamiliar path because you just really don't know what to expect. And I think sometimes when you're kind of going through life and you're going through a new journey, you realize like it takes so long to kind of get through the chapters and there's so many bumps of the roads and pauses and, it doesn't really move as fast as you think. I find myself in positions where I'm like, everything's taking a lot longer than I thought.
Yes.
Especially me kind of going in new directions and trying new things. I'm finding myself like in this predicament of like, okay, I hate to say it, when you kind of go a new direction, you find yourself having more bad days than good days at first. You know what I mean? And so I'm trying to give myself the grace of knowing like, hey, it's going to take a little more time. And that's okay. So I feel like it does become a little more fearful because you're just like, you really don't know what to expect.
Yeah. I think when I think of fear and staying on a path that no longer serves you, it's the fear of pivoting. But the quote that comes to mind for me is like, better to have tried and failed than to not have tried at all.
Yes, I love that.
Are you one day going to regret the fact that you literally didn't even give it a go?
Come on.
Like the fact that you didn't even attempt. So I think that's where fear can keep us locked in and just stuck on a path that like we should have been off for a long time. Because as you said, change is scary. And I think staying because you're scared is how years can go
right
on and on without you even realizing it.
And I feel like something that you just kind of touched on that made me think about, I know for me, like I never saw building my own brand, business, being an entrepreneur, even doing something like this until maybe like 3 years ago. Like I always thought I was just going to be a 9-to-5 girly. Like I will never do anything outside of work for a company. It sounded so crazy to me, right? But now us just kind of going through this, it is growing pains, but I feel like eventually, we're going to look back and laugh at this stuff right now, right? Like, remember that time we had to change our podcast name? You know what I mean? Bro. Even though things like this take time, it costs money and all those things, life is just really interesting.
And I'm looking forward to the day that we look back and laugh and be like, remember when we had to change the name? Remember when we had a million technical difficulties? Remember when we had to do everything ourselves?
Yep. Right. But then you look at the life that you've built and you're like, and I would do it all over again, right?
Yes. Maybe like fast forward through this.
That's what I'm saying. Like, can we push fast forward just a little bit?
Yeah. But also like you saying you would always be a corporate girl, or that's what you thought in your head, right? Like a lot of the fear is fear of the unknown. And sometimes what you realize is that it appears scarier in your mind than it actually is. I even think about that like with moving. Because I've moved so many times and there's so many people in my family that like are afraid to move, or I know there's plenty of people that, maybe are afraid to leave their hometowns. But yes, like anything, there's going to be growing pains, right? Like you have to make new friends. Making new friends as an adult can be scary. Yeah. But I do feel like the fear of the unknown is scarier than the reality of when you actually start doing it, Right.
And you start seeing like reaping the benefits of it, right?
Yeah.
Then it's like, I'm so glad I did that thing.
Yeah. You just have to like get over that initial hump.
Yeah, right. For me, I feel like it looks harder because my parents aren't entrepreneurs, or a lot of my family members, no one kind of like took the leap of faith. All of them are really just like, they just worked a corporate job and retired, right? And they live off their pensions, etc. So I feel like I'm doing something that none of my family members really have ever done. So it's kind of like I'm learning all by myself, and, I'm reaching out to other people that are on this journey. But when you don't really have anyone that's close to you in your friend group or your family that's doing something that's so different from what they're used to, it does make it a little harder. My next question to you is, how do you build the courage to pivot when everyone around you thinks you should just stay on the course you're currently on?
And we were just talking about this, not taking advice from people who have not done what you're trying to accomplish or are not where you want to be.
Come on.
Right. You're going to have to just get uncomfortable, like maybe disappointing people who are not the ones in your shoes, like I said earlier. Of course, you cannot get anywhere without your support system.
Yes.
But that does not mean that they are automatically entitled to you heeding their advice.
Right.
You know, your life is like not a democracy.
Mhm.
Everybody doesn't like get a vote in what decisions you make that you feel like are aligned with the path and the vision that you see for your life. So yeah, definitely not taking advice from anyone who has not accomplished what you are seeking to accomplish. And I think in the Black community specifically, that can be difficult. Like a lot of us are doing first generational type things. Maybe it's not college, but maybe it is entrepreneurship or whatever the case may be. Or maybe you are the first person in your family who decides to move far away, whatever. So a lot of times I feel like for us as Black people, a lot of the people in our family are going to have opinions, but also have not achieved what maybe our generation or younger generations are seeking to achieve. But also to your point, for a lot of them, it was like you go to work, you put money in your 401k and you retire. And this whole idea of taking these other non-traditional paths like a podcast or creating content or whatever it is just like unheard of. So that's where it's like they very well can mean well. And their advice can still be sound and safe. But they have not done what you're trying to achieve.
We're just in a different time and age now, I feel like. So it's like you just got to do a little more, I think, now in today's time. But I think for me, when I just think about when people want me to kind of stay where I'm at, I'm like, oh, so you thought that like this is just kind of where I was going to land. You know, one thing about me, I feel like I'm really big on this may be where you currently think I am, but I'm always like really thinking ahead. I'm always thinking of like, we always talk about what's next. You know, by the time I feel like I accomplish a goal, I'm already like, okay, so what am I trying to do now? And I feel like I never want to be complacent. So I think a lot of it comes from that and just always wanting to see like, how good can life get? So I think when people say certain things like that, you know, you just have to keep people's opinions out of it. I think it's easier said than done because, you know, some of us like me, like I used to be a people pleaser. So I used to care what people think, but now I'm like, I literally can't. Like your life is your life. My life is my life. I think it takes time and it takes tough skin to eventually stop caring what people think about you and your life and what you do, what you say, especially when I think you're putting yourself out online, right? Like, I just wonder now how many people are looking at us, sending videos of us on our podcast back and forth, like, why would she say that? Or why she think like that? You know what I mean? But I'm glad I'm at the point now where it's like, I actually don't care what people think about me anymore because it's like, I'm doing something that you're just not, like we say, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to step out of my own comfort zone tremendously. And I think it pays off when you step out of your comfort zone for sure.
Yeah. But also, I thought about that too the other day where I was just watching one of our episodes or something. I don't remember. And I was just like, this is a real podcast. You know, like I was just looking and I was just like looking at our branding and looking at like the quality of the video. And I was just like, wow, this is a real podcast. And also just absolutely when you start something, and of course everybody's going to be able to have so much doubt when you're just getting started and you have 2 followers or whatever it is. But now, and I think that was the aha moment for me. You know what it was? I was watching, but also lately we've just been getting so many comments that I was like, no, this is a real community. We're really impacting people in real life. We're really creating a space for people to feel seen and heard in real life. That's what I was really saying. Not, oh, this is really a podcast. But like, no, we're actually achieving what we set out to do. So that was kind of like the aha moment for me. But I also think sometimes people push back because they're putting themselves in your shoes. And if they were to do it, they would be afraid.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, so they're going to project that fear onto you. But also, there's always going to be one. There's always going to be somebody that is triggered that you were having the courage, like you said, to do what they cannot, or that they were too fearful or still are too fearful to ever put themselves out there in that way or make some sort of a drastic change. Last question to you. Looking back, how do you recognize a pivot that was actually the best thing that ever happened to you?
When I think of that, I always think of my pivot of when I basically made the move from California to Houston, Texas. I think it came at a really pivotal moment of my life because it was like I just graduated college. So, I'm in my younger 20s, no real experience set, just a degree, and trying to find a job, right? And so I kind of made this shift in the move to Houston. And I think it really opened me up to a lot of just big names and big companies that I probably wouldn't have the opportunity to work with when I was in LA, just because it's such a saturated market already, right? So long story short, when I kind of just look back on my journey, I'm like, it was the best thing for me, my blessing in disguise and the biggest pivot, because I think, I really wouldn't be where I am today, or just my mindset, if I didn't make that big move. Like, honestly, let's be honest, we wouldn't be sitting on this couch if I would have stayed in LA, because I would have never met Blake.
Yeah.
I met Blake when I moved to Houston. So, you have to realize like a big pivot is needed. And, when I think of just like my entrepreneurial spirit, meeting my boyfriend, meeting the great quality of friends that I have now, like I would have not had that if I didn't make the big move to Texas. And, I love to go back home, but when I go back home, I'm like, I would be so far behind. Like, me and my parents always laugh about that all the time. We're like, imagine where I'd be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, no offense, I probably would have to still be living with them because it's so expensive to live in California right now. And, to be able to travel to the places that we have, driving the nice cars, no offense, being able to buy myself a designer bag if I want to, like all these things that I'm able to do, I would not have been able to do that if I would have stayed in California, because here it's just like I've really been able to just grow the corporate ladder, but also, generate income outside of just like my 9 to 5. And so all of the things I have now, like it wouldn't have happened. I'm always a big advocate of a big pivot. And a lot of my friends, like I just went back home last week and, I was just talking to my friend and she's like, like look at everything you've done, since you've been in Houston. And so many of my friends and family say that back home as far as just being so proud of me, because it's like I've really blossomed and I think I've really come out my shell being out here. But I think when you're in a different environment, it kind of forces you to just really get it, because you have so many looking at you like, what's she gonna do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna show y'all. Love a good pivot. What about you?
Yeah, I wrote down bigger the risk, the bigger the reward.
Yes, I love that quote as well.
Right, because it's looking back, how do you recognize a pivot that was actually the best thing that ever happened to you? Usually the thing that you are most afraid to leave behind, or a decision that's extremely scary, is the number one thing that you're going to be most grateful that you did.
Yes.
Right? Because I moved here from New York. And again, if I had not done that, this podcast would cease to exist as well.
Yeah.
So no risk, no reward. And nothing worth having comes easy, as they say.
Oh, no.
Well, a new segment that we are introducing under our new name, Softly Unfiltered, is today's unfiltered moment, which is going to be whatever we feel like it on any given day. It might be our hot take we're feeling. It might be a cultural moment. It might be a testimony, but it'll just be, real life in some capacity. And so on the topic of just rebranding and pivoting, I wanted to share some stories that I found that I felt like just aligned.
Okay.
So the first one is career layoff. This person said, I had a string of jobs ending with being laid off because of budget cuts. One of which was from this job I absolutely adored, and I was devastated. The next day, one of the other people laid off sent me a contact for his recruiter, and I called her. She said it's rare for job descriptions matching what I need to come across her desk, but she will call me if one ever did. Well, literally the next day, she calls back with one which I landed. At that job, I had a coworker who went out on maternity leave, and I volunteered to absorb her role while she was gone. I learned on the job since it was a little different than what I was doing. Well, doing that allowed me to pivot in my career where I make substantially more, all because I got laid off at a very specific time.
Love that.
I love that because, again, rejection, let's call it, they got laid off.
Right.
But also the fact that they took it upon themselves again to kind of pivot within that role and take on somebody else's role that they really didn't know and had to learn on the fly. Like, you're already at a new job.
Yep.
And then to have to, take on somebody else's work and learn it. But then that put them on the path where they make significantly more. So I thought that was interesting. The second story was hospital closing. The hospital where I worked for 25 years went bankrupt and closed. It was sudden and for me traumatic. I worked for a year at an alcohol and drug rehab facility, which was hell, and then moved to North Carolina, where my best friend talked me into trying freelance writing. My wife agreed to help support us while I got started, and it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. If the hospital hadn't gone under, I'd probably still be there.
Yeah.
What was interesting to me about this one was they're not just saying they got laid off and then they started their dream job. They specifically said, I worked for a year at an alcohol and drug rehab facility, which was hell.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, sometimes you got to pivot multiple times.
Come on.
Sometimes you have to go through that phase where you're doing what you have to do to then feel like, okay, I can breathe now. Or, okay, yeah, this feels right.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it takes a few pivots and then you finally land where you're supposed to.
Yeah. I think that's important to remember while we're on this topic is like, if we change the name again in a year, stick with us, please. No, I'm joking.
Please.
Oh gosh. And the last one was summer camp rejection. Got kicked out of my yearly summer camp when I was young. Sounds dumb, I know, but being 11 and having loved it there, I was beyond devastated, cried for weeks and weeks. Being rejected by a place I practically worshipped at such a young age wrecked me. My parents took me on a tour of different summer camps the year after, and I was absolutely a bitchy brat because in my mind, there's no place better than the old camp. Hilarious and embarrassing in hindsight. Ended up going, and I discovered while it wasn't as fancy as the old camp, it was a million times better in all of the ways that mattered. I gained sisterhood, made lifelong friends that I still keep up with, made many of the best memories of my life even to this day, and learned a lot of life lessons and things about myself and others. I was a camper for 7 years, then stayed on as a counselor for a few more and became an archery instructor. I actually attended the camp's 95th anniversary weekend last year and partied my ass off with tons of girls I grew up with as campers. It was a blast. To this day, when I'm having a hard time or really struggling, I use it to remind me that sometimes a kick in the teeth is the best thing for you.
Yeah. It really is. Because I have someone like really close to me right now that was unfortunately let go from their job, but now has landed a better job because it's remote. And now they're able to focus on not only just having more like work-life balance, but also finally able to get their business that they've been wanting to build for so long off the ground. And I told that person, I'm like, they were so attached to that company that they were at. And when they had to be removed from it, I'm like, God knew you weren't going to start the business until he had to forcefully remove you from that situation. So there's times where if we do not give up and surrender, God will forcefully remove your hand. And it's always a good thing. I know sometimes it's hard, but I feel like rejection equals redirection, right?
But also sometimes when things or people or whatever it is start dropping like flies, it's like almost a good thing.
Yeah.
It's like clearing out room for what is supposed to be there.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because sometimes I think it's hard to get rid of dead weight. So it just like forcefully leaves. You're like, oh, that's interesting.
The trash takes itself out.
Always. Scram.
Skedaddle, please.
Alrighty, guys. I'm going to say, instead of we used to do mantra moments, we are now calling it soft landing. So today's soft landing is changing direction is not the same as losing yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go of the version of the plan you were once attached to and trust what's building deep inside.
Yeah. I think it's about not looking at pivoting as like a detour, but more of like, it's a part of your journey. It was meant to be part of how you get to where you're supposed to be.
Right.
And you'll always be grateful for it. So let us know, what is your biggest like blessing in disguise story or, a time in your life where you felt like you had to pivot, or are you stuck right now? And this episode is making you realize it's time for you to make a change. So please let us know. We've been reading a lot of your comments lately. Well, we always read them, but there's been so many more lately, which we are very grateful for. So please keep commenting on all platforms. We're not going to say what next week is because I don't know what it is.
This one we don't know shit.
So speaking of pivoting, let me do that in real time. Please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and follow us on all platforms. If you are watching via video, that will be on the screen and in the description. So give us a like, comment, follow, all of the things, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.